Mic check, mic check. Welcome to another episode of the Second Half Podcast. We are back with another episode. I'm your host, Jabari Saunders. Make sure you take care of the business. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, hit the like button. And we are going to dive right into this next conversation. I'm excited to have this one. Not only graduated magna cum laude from Harvard, he was a co-captain of his basketball team. He's also an overseas professional basketball player, former CEO of Chicago public school system. He's a husband, a father, of course, the former U.S. Secretary of Education, who was nominated by former President Barack Obama. He's now currently a managing partner at Chicago CRED. And one thing I will say, this man has a mean left hand. He will give it to you however you want it on the basketball court. He is a left-handed assassin, none other than Arne Duncan. Arne, appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. And this is quite a setup, and that jump shot was broke this morning, as you saw. So we'll see what tomorrow brings.
We'll see what tomorrow. There's always a new day, right? We'll go ahead and get
That's
right.
The hope. That's the hope.
There's the hope. There's the hope, for sure. So let's go ahead and get it started. You know, where did the journey begin for you? Like, where'd you grow up?
Well, it's sort of crazy. We're at 46 in Woodlawn, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up at 56 in Blackstone, but my mother ran an after-school tutoring program right at the corner of 46 in Woodlawn here.
Oh, wow.
This will be a deep story for you. So that was the Mennonite church, and that's her. So we grew up as a part of her program from the time we were born.
Okay.
She started in 61. I was born in 64. My sister in 67. My brother in 70, and that was the Mennonite church. The Blackstone Rangers controlled this neighborhood.
Yep.
They wanted to use that church as an arsenal. The pastor there wouldn't let them, so they firebombed the church.
Oh, wow.
They blew it up. So that's like one of my earliest memories. Was probably 3 or 4 or 5, probably 4 or 5. I don't even remember. Where we then moved to the church, who's still there, the Kevin Ellis Church down the block.
Yeah,
I remember carrying carts of books, down the block to the next place because that place was uninhabitable. So this is literally where I grew up. I grew up playing basketball at Shakespeare.
Oh, wow.
Across the street when they had real courts.
Yeah.
This is home. So this community is where it shaped me athletically, academically, socially, and
love it.
As you know, 47th Street was the invisible barrier between middle class integrated Hyde Park, and this was all black, all poor, North Kenwood, Oakland. Different zip codes, the same zip code, and we would walk some days. I mean, it was 12 blocks from our house. Yeah. And so living in those two different worlds every day, friends during the school day, but my friends after school here, this literally, it's just funny to hear, this literally shaped me. So this is home. No. The neighborhood's changed a lot from those days.
Sure. It sure has changed. I mean, when you just walk around, you just feel, that energy of, like you said, Hyde Park, North Kenwood area, but it's changed a lot. The territory's changed. You're right there on Lake Michigan right here. So not, just a couple blocks over, and, just some good energy, great people all in the same area as well as you grew up in, for sure. So living in this area, of course, like you said, you dealt with firebombings growing up at the early ages. It's very memorable, right down the block. But, what was that upbringing like around your family? Like, what was that for you?
Yeah, we as a kid, you don't know anything. That's all you know is your family, but we were a little different. So at home and here. So both my parents were educators. My dad was a professor at the University of Chicago. Okay. My mother ran her after-school tutoring program here. So we grew up in a household full of books and no TV. So I used to have to sneak to my friend's house to watch TV once in a while. So I missed a lot culturally, or popular culture. Yeah. But it's actually shaped all of my work. Is this growing up with all my friends here who happen to not have a lot of money, happen not to have the most functional families often, but seeing what they could do over time, seeing how my mother and all the other volunteers changed their lives. Just seeing the potential that kids have, regardless whether they're born or whatever the circumstances are. That's been the driving force in my life of trying to sort of equalize that, because my friends during the afternoon here were as talented, as smart, as hardworking as my friends during the school day in Hyde Park, going to lab schools, but they just didn't begin to have the kind of opportunities. And that disparity, again, from 10 blocks, 12 blocks, that fundamental unfairness, it sort of has been the driving force in my life of how you try and figure that out. So I can tell you a million stories, but the guys you probably wouldn't remember, Ronald Ragland and Michael Clark Duncan were like brothers. Tadero Ford, who played at Dunbar, the other two played at King. Those are like my older brothers growing up growing up here, and just sort of shaped who I was. I remember the the guy who ran my mother's philosophy was the 10-year-olds taught the 5-year-olds, the 15-years taught the 10-year-olds. So we all grew up teaching and being taught. And
teaching each other,
the older guy who taught our group was a guy named Kerry Holly, who lived, the building's torn down, but he lived literally half a block, north of here.
Okay.
Super smart, but I'll never forget, he grew up, when he was born, his mother was on the streets. His mother wrapped him in newspaper and threw him in the garbage.
Oh, jeez.
And his grandmother took him out of the garbage and raised him, and he ended up, running our group of guys for years.
Wow.
He's gone on to be a huge tech leader in Silicon Valley and travels internationally. But he literally started his life in a garbage can.
Wow.
And I remember my mother was having him balance her checkbook when he was like 13, 14, like he was just this gifted. We lied. We didn't want him to go to King because he wouldn't have made it to King. So we lied and used our address.
Okay.
So he went to Kenwood.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do to get what you need to get.
My mother normally played it pretty straight, but she was like, no. So we got all that mail. But so it's just a lot of history here and a lot of amazing memories that were formative. And then I took a year off between my junior and senior year of college, which was very non-traditional.
Yeah.
It wasn't a gap year then, but I basically worked full-time with my mother. I was just trying to figure out, was this a piece of who I was or was this who I was? And most of my friends were, applying to law school and business school or, going to go work on investment banking. I just didn't think that was me. I didn't know what it meant, but I just sort of felt during that year that I had to find some way to try and follow in her footsteps. And she did the work for 52 years. Unfortunately, she has Alzheimer's now, so her health gave out. But just that dedication. She worked, literally 365. She never took a day off.
Geez.
Christmas, New Year's, would be here. And
that's beautiful.
It was powerful.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
No, it sounds like, there's so much that you were able to do. You learned from her how to corral a community around. It seems like that was even your introduction, if you will, into education, knowing that, like you said, you didn't have TVs around. Yeah. And we'll get to that point down the road for sure. But, I think that's a solid foundation that you had already, and you just had those things, and you had a group of people that you would keep close to you as well.
Yeah, the basketball started there too. She was real strict. We always had to do our academic work for us before we could play in the gym.
All right.
But for years we played kick baseball. I don't really know what kick baseball is.
I was going to say, did you play any other sports?
Kick baseball we played. At a certain point in 9 or 10 or something, we shifted from kick baseball to basketball.
Okay.
So that's how that journey started. And 13, 14, I started to leave the church and go out to Shakespeare and Forestville and other places to play. Luckily we shifted. I'd still be playing kick baseball to this day.
I love it. So, of course, Chicago, huge basketball city. Literally, from the time you grow up, you're literally having the ball put in your hand. Who was the one who put the ball in your hands to get you to play?
No, it was what I just said. It wasn't a certain day. It was at my mother's program, and at one point we shifted from kick baseball to basketball. And then so that's where I grew up playing. I had a rim in the alley behind our house where we lived on 56 in Blackstone. Yeah. So those were the two places. Playing it first at the church, and then later out at Shakespeare, and then in the alley behind my house at Blackstone. Those were, you got a little older, you started trying to sneak into gyms at the University of Chicago, but started playing outside and at the church.
Nice. When did you realize that you could play? Like basketball was your sport, and you could go out here and do well in it?
It was interesting with the group of guys we had. It just sort of worked out that way. It was hard at the time, but it was in the long run so beneficial for me. I was like the youngest, and I was the smallest. Yeah. I was 5'3" as a freshman in high school, so I grew a foot in high school. I was the youngest. I was probably the worst player. I was the slowest. I was the smallest, and so it was a battle every day just to sort of compete with that group. Yep. And so I remember I was the opposite, feeling like you're good, like you're just literally trying to survive. And it was hard. And then it wasn't, that was probably 11, 12, 13, 14. Then I finally grew and then started to feel like I could compete a little bit better. But for a long time it was it was not an easy journey, and we didn't have AAU, we didn't have anything like that. So that was all sort of getting your butt kicked every day. Yeah. It was hard, but it toughens you up. And I remember it was weird. Like we would play games at 24, and I would never shoot. But then when we get to 22, 22, other guys would get a little nervous and not want to shoot. And I didn't really care, and I hadn't shot all game, so now I'm like, hey, let me shoot.
Exactly.
And so I used to be like, I wouldn't shoot all game, but I'd try and hit the winning basket, and just learning and I didn't feel any pressure because I was just happy to take a shot for once. Yeah. But being able to try and perform in those pressure moments and more clutch moments, and justifying your role on the court. Yep. And we would bring in teams from different parts of the city, and we had our own little team, and we did, honestly, we destroyed a lot of folks. We were very, very, very good.
That's great.
But I was the 8, 9, 10 guy. I was
you were fighting for spots, fighting for some minutes.
For sure. My mother wasn't running the program.
she wasn't the one out there conducting it and saying, "Yeah, you on the court now, huh?"
She was competitive too. We almost never lost. Once or twice, someone may have been beating us. And she just let the game go on. Like, we're supposed to go home 8 o'clock. We played at 8, 8:30. As soon as we'd go up, she said, "Game over." She was like the most competitive one out there.
Oh, jeez.
A lot of memories.
Some of those. Tell me a little bit about some of those memories while we're here. Just, Chicago, we're so segregated. You got South Side. They'll go. Some people will travel and go to the West spot, but not for a while. It wasn't. But basketball was usually that navigator that would take you around and go to different sides. Go up north and play at the Armory, or go out to the West side or on the South side. Where were those spots that you remember going to just kind of compete at that level?
Yeah, if you want to be a good basketball player in Chicago, you have to go to the South and West sides.
Yeah.
So I just took take the CTA bus to to wherever, and I had people who looked out for me and frankly protected me and sort of gave me safe passage in our neighborhoods. And I started to lose some of them to gun violence when I was a teen. So that's part of why I do what I do now to try and sort of honor their memory. But I can tell you, I mean, I saw some crazy things. I was in some crazy situations, but I never got touched ever. I just have so much, respect and gratitude that you had that past and you had people that looked out for you. So you saw everything. Some situations you had to get out of. But there was literally never one time where I had a issue going anywhere. And I was, the one white kid everywhere. So I have so much gratitude and thankfulness to the community for raising me, but protecting me and giving me that chance to pursue my passion. If that would have got shut down, I don't know what you would have done.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. So like you said, you ended up going to Chicago Lab School. You were running around the city playing against whoever you possibly could. There was no AAU. There was no EYBL. There was none of those things like that, right? Where was specifically, like, how did you kind of get in that role of being recruited? Because you didn't have the AAUs and the EYBLs or things like that.
Yeah, so I played it in the YBI out here at YVI out at Kenwood, and those were amazing tournaments. But I was not heavily recruited at all. I was a decent high school player. I wasn't some great player. Lab schools, it was an academic school. We weren't a great basketball program. I grew another couple inches in college. So I remember going to a camp between my junior and senior year called AFBE. I don't know if you remember that. It was called Athletes for Better Education. It was like the best players from across Illinois. And I remember we had only one guy. It was 100, 150 guys. I remember the only one that went pro was Kevin Duckworth, that made it NBA. Was Duck. He was a good man. And I remember them saying to me, like, that's when I performed better than people. I was unknown, so I sort of outperformed because I was a nobody. So I got a little interest there. I remember them asking about my grades, and said I had good grades. And they said, you need to think about the Ivy League. It was weird because it never sort of occurred. I was just trying to go play anywhere. They're like, you're not going to be a pro, but you should try and go to the Ivy League. So that sort of opened my eyes. And I talked to a few schools, and Harvard sort of wanted me, but it wasn't like I was heavily recruited. I remember deciding to go.
Nobody was rolling the red carpet out for you.
There's no NIL deal. I remember calling the coach and saying, I'm going to come. He's like, okay, great. But it wasn't like, and then the truth is, when I got there, I actually got cut my freshman year.
Really?
I didn't make the varsity team.
Wow.
So it was a very, very, very tough year, and played in the JV team and did real well, and it sort of ended up starting the sophomore year as a sixth man, and starting by the time I was at Christmas. But it almost didn't work. I remember freshman year I was miserable. I was thinking about transferring. I had nowhere to go. So mine has not been a linear journey. I'm a little bit of a non-traditional player, as you're saying, and so I was not heavily recruited at all. But was lucky that it all worked out, but it did not look for a long time like it was going to work out.
I got you. So there was no plan at all of like, oh, my mother's in education. She wants to push me in that space, so I'm going to go to an Ivy League school, or it was just the luck of the draw a little bit.
Yeah, it was, and it was probably too much. So when I see it now with kids, all I was focused on was basketball. Like if DePaul would have wanted me, I would have gone to DePaul. I've thought about it. I almost transferred to King my senior year, which would have been crazy. I practiced with them all summer. And then I remember Ephraim Winters and Reggie Woodward went to Illinois that year, so I would have probably got packaged with them and probably wouldn't have played. But I wasn't thinking clearly about life beyond basketball until I went to that camp, and they said you need to sort of think about the Ivy League. And both my parents were well educated. I think I was too laser focused just on
we all do
just
that.
On hoops.
We all do that.
Yeah,
but that's what this podcast is, to try to expose a little bit, like get you out earlier to just kind of think about things beyond the game.
So it's a great point. What I was lucky is I had that academic, I didn't value it enough, but I had that academic background. I had educated parents. I went to a great school. I got good grades. Yeah. And so I had that to fall back on, where a lot of guys, if all they have is hoops and nothing else, and so many of my friends I grew up with were better than me and didn't quite make the NBA and really, really struggled. And so that was just a blessing that good luck that I had that structure and was able to have a plan B as well as a plan A.
Nice. I love it. So you're at this prestigious school at Harvard University, right? What is that? Like you said, you didn't make it the first year. What's that kind of court, school balance that you had to do in order to be successful and earn grades and find yourself back on the court?
Yeah, that was nothing different for me, because I went to a great, hard academic school, so I had good study habits. I had good work ethic. Okay. The academics, I don't say that was the easy part for me. My first year was hard. I never studied harder. I never got worse grades. You got to figure out what to study and how to study. Yeah. But for me, it was really trying to battle to be successful on the court, and had to sort of fight my way past guys who were more heavily recruited and bigger reputations. But honestly, it was growing up here and kind of being tougher than folks, and no one was going to outwork me, and that over time, that paid off big time.
Absolutely.
I remember one guy was like 15 All-American, averaged like 40 points in high school, and that's whose spot I ended up taking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was a little hungrier.
Yeah.
And over time, people see that.
I tell that sometimes to kids that I talk to every now and again. It's like sometimes it's just about outworking a person.
Well, that's all I've never been athletic. I've never dunked on anybody. So that's all I've had. But for me, it's work, but I love it. So it's not, I don't feel like I have to I want to go to the gym. I want to shoot. I want to work out.
For sure.
And that work ethic that was sort of ground into me early. I remember we would play the gym. It was hot. It would be hot summer days like this, in a church gym. And I remember we had a rule. I don't even know why. Like, we would never drink water, which wasn't healthy or smart. Like, it's not
at all.
Kids, please hydrate if you're listening. But that's how we grew up. We would never drink till we were done playing. And would take like 2 sips and just give it to the next guy. I don't know even where that routine or ritual came from, but it was that sort of toughness that you could do things that other folks couldn't do.
Yeah, it's that endurance. It's, perseverance to be able to push through. The mental toughness. I love it. While you were there, what were some of the memories that you had that was really just, whether it was on court or also in the classroom and just with your peers?
Yeah, we remember played Duke 3 times, and that was I never forget going to Duke, and we get there hour or two before the game.
Okay.
The stands are packed. Everyone's reading newspaper, looking at the newspaper, not looking at you. And I'm like, man, this is heaven. This is
playing in Cameron Indoor Arena.
Played there once. Played them twice at our home, which was great. We almost. This is when they were just starting to get good with Coach K. So my sophomore year, I think we lost by 3.
Okay.
Real close game, could have won, and then they beat us pretty bad the next year at Cameron, and then beat us back at home. But seeing their improvement, that was Johnny Dawkins and Jay Billis and all those guys, Mark Allery.
Wow.
Tommy Amaker, coaches now at Harvard.
Yeah, at Harvard.
Seeing them improve, that was right at the start of that. But amazing memories, and felt so lucky. And I never took it for granted, because I could easily not have ended up playing at all and have a chance to play and start and be captain and do all those things. That was it was not something that was ever like a foregone conclusion for me. So it was times I cherish.
Wow. Love it. I love that journey. So you graduated summa cum laude, right? You were an academic All-American. Did you think that was going to be the last time that you were going to be playing at that elite level at all? Or
well, this is where, again, I've been a little bit more lucky and smart. All I want to do is play pro basketball. Gotcha. So I didn't apply for any jobs.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
It was not It was not, kids, please apply for jobs.
Yes.
please have something. But I was so focused. So I'll tell you exactly. I played that summer. It was before the G League. It was called the USBL. It was a professional league out there. I played on the Rhode Island Gulls. Made that team somehow. Teaming with Muggsy Bogues.
Okay.
And Muggsy was obviously amazing. And that was his, I never played with some great guards, but he was amazing. Did that for a little bit. Got cut like halfway into the season, so I was on the margins there. And it was crazy. I got cut and then went back to graduate. But if I hadn't got cut, I probably wouldn't even graduate, which really wasn't smart. I had to go back and write a paper too, but I was so focused on that. So did that. Got invited to try out with the Boston Celtics. Okay. And everyone says I was the last guy cut. I wasn't the last guy cut. Like I was cut early. But it was amazing. That was when they were, they were winning championships. That was, Bird and McHale, those guys. But I don't think the bench wasn't strong. They didn't have a bench. So it was actually like a perfect opportunity. Fit for you, And it just wasn't quite good enough. But just getting a taste of that and playing with those guys and getting a sense of what that was. Yeah. And then it was a summer, and then that would have been probably, I don't know what, August, September. And then for a couple months I had nothing. And I was just working out, but there was nothing happening. And I remember I was living at home, and at some point you got to sort of give up on that. Yep. And I remember one time I came home from working out. My dad, came and said, do you want to go to Australia? I said, what are you talking about? He said, a coach from Australia just called. And it was a teammate of mine from Harvard who had played over there. He knew, he had played there 2 years before. Okay. They had an injury. Jeez. So like 2 days later, I was going to Australia, and it came out of nowhere. So again, total luck, and it had to be somebody else getting hurt to open. You're allowed 2 Americans at that point to open up a spot for me. Yep. But had that not happened, that journey would have, at some point, you just have to let it go. So played there for 4 years, and obviously just an amazing, unbelievable opportunity. But same thing, no guarantees, and it took frankly a bad break on someone else's to open me
someone
up.
Else's unfortunate.
I'll never forget so many stories. So my assistant coach at Harvard was Coach Thibodeau.
Okay,
it was the Knicks coach now, and this was like pre-video, pre-tape, whatever. And he talked to the Australian coach. Who's still actually he's an Olympic coach now for Australia. He's an American guy. He's a coach, a guy named Brian Gorgon. And he said he's like Larry Bird, but better with a ball. And every time I make an error, the coach would just look at me and say, Larry Bird, but better with a ball. So I've owed tips forever.
There you go.
He got me a job. He got me over there.
Exactly.
And, there was no tape to tell the truth on that.
Oh, wow.
But, that's how I got over there.
That's such an interesting story. Like even go back a little bit, because you got a chance to just show up and play with the guys down at Boston Celtics, and that's when they were winning championships. Being in the presence of that, were you intimidated at all, or did you just I'm still using that Chicago toughness?
It's a good question. It's funny. I probably should have been. I wasn't. Yeah. And I grew up playing in the summer leagues here with everybody, with Isaiah, Mark, so I've played against great players since coming out of, since as soon as I graduated from high school, I was playing in the summer leagues with Triton and IIT. Yeah. So I probably should have been, but I wasn't really. And I mean, it's maybe a little, I felt like I belonged, like I felt I could compete. And so that, I didn't worry about that. I remember just asking, what's the culture like? And it was a guy, Fred Roberts. I don't know if you remember a guy named Fred Roberts. He said it's just win, baby, win. Just win, baby, win. And I was like, I still remember that. I was like, that's all they were about.
Well, they just won last night or a couple of nights ago. They got a world championship. So
the guy who ended up playing, actually, the guy who sort of played the role I could have was Rick Carlisle.
Oh, wow.
So Rick Carlisle was coming out of Virginia. Yeah. And he ended up being, sort of at the end of that bench, but it was similar style, similar player. And it's funny. I look at his trajectory, pros and coaching. And had I gone that route, I probably would have done the same thing. Yeah, and I was crushed when I didn't make it.
Of course.
But I'm really grateful, because as much as I love hoops, I think there's more important things in life than hoops. Absolutely. So it's crazy how life turns out. But had I been a little better, I just would have stayed on that trajectory and wouldn't have had the opportunity to try and do the things I have in the community.
For sure. Absolutely. So that experience took you to Australia. Your dad had the phone conversation. Hey, you're going over there. You get there. You're playing all those things. But you weren't only just playing basketball there. You were doing some off the court things as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was trying to think stuff through. So I did a bunch of different things. I worked with kids who were awards of the state. I coached a team of urban Aborigines.
Wow.
I was doing clinics at schools all the time. And so, being a pro is a pretty good life. I was working out 3 times, working out in the morning, lift in the afternoon, go to practice at night. But you had time. And I was trying to learn and grow and stretch myself. And I've always been connected to kids and connected to the community. And just to be in a total different part of the world, different culture, different whatever, and just trying to understand the history and the culture there, and what's happened to African Americans here is obviously horrific, but what happened to Aborigines there was a whole different level.
Yeah, and
just understanding that, it was a lot. So it was a real chance for me to learn. I worked with some kids who had been incarcerated there, and just trying to do the similar stuff to what I did here, but just in a different environment, and trying to understand that culture as best I could. So it was a chance for me to learn and grow and start to think through what my next steps were.
Seem to always, the theme that I always keep hearing is kind of education and service. And those are two things that really seem to help you see this happening now that starts to formulate who you were later on, even after the game is done. And I think that's something that I'm definitely going to touch on here in a little bit. But, obviously, like you said, basketball wasn't that only thing. Again, did you know that you were going to find and weave yourself into education and service beyond this, or was that something you just said fell into?
These are all these are all crazy stories. So, but it's important. So my hero growing up, I went to lab schools, which was a K-12 school. So the star of the high school basketball team was a guy named John Rogers.
Yep.
John was 6 years older than me, and he was like my Michael Jordan. So I followed him. I was in 5th and 6th and 7th grade. I'd follow him around like a puppy dog and go to the games and sneak on the bus to the away games and watch. So he became, my mentor in my role. I sort of forced myself underneath his wing, and he is, you probably know, started a company called Aerial Capital when he was like 24.
Yeah.
And that company was starting to do well. And John thinks differently too. And rather than buying a house or a boat or a fancy car, he wanted to set up a nonprofit to work in the community.
Yeah.
And he knew of my family's involvement. And so he basically said, will you come back and set up the Aerial Foundation? Oh, wow. And this is really, really crazy. But I was the life over there, you're paid well. They give you food, they give you a car, they give you a house. I met my wife, and it's a seductive lifestyle. Yeah. And had I stayed there another year or two, I would have stayed there forever. I would have got citizenship. I'd have played forever. I would have coached.
Yep.
And I wanted to come home and help because every day I knew the only reason I had that opportunity was because of everything everybody had given to me and done for me here. And to disappear to the other side of the earth, literally the other side of the earth, didn't feel right.
Sure.
I mean, that's a lot of Americans did.
Yeah.
So he gave me that chance. And absent that, I didn't know a lot of people. Yeah. Absent that, I swear I would still be living there. I would have I wanted to come home, but I would have had nothing to come home to. And so it's amazing how your life, there's sort of the forks in the road. And so he gave me that chance. So I stopped playing, which was hard, sort of at your prime. Yeah. But I just knew if I did another year or two, I was never coming home. And he was ready to go. And so it was my girlfriend, married her, and moved back here. But that literally changed my life.
That was interesting.
And absent that, totally different trajectory.
Totally, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that leads us right into the second half. And I think that's beautiful that you found yourself finding a mentor who just happened to be right back here in Chicago, and none other than John Rogers, who's doing great work with Aerial Capital over there. So, and not only that, play basketball as well.
Well, that was the tie. I mean, that's the theme in all this. Had he not been a great player, I wouldn't have been following him around. So he was a all-state player, captain of Princeton, and super competitive. We played together for years and 3-on-3s all over the country.
Yeah.
But basketball is all my relationships are through hoops.
Love it. All right, so now took the shoes off for the last time, threw them in the locker. Well, I wouldn't say the last time, but just playing at that elite level, you transition into your second half. Now that they're in the locker, did you start to build a plan? I know we kind of talked about that before. At this point, it seems like you're starting to finally writing out your plan of what you're going to do next and making those next steps?
Yeah, so what we did is we stayed at the same church. My mother then moved to 50th and First Baptist, 50th and Ellis, right across from Push. So we started an I Have a Dream program. My sister came and worked with me where we took a group of 6th graders and promised if they made it through high school, we would pay for their college. And that was really important to me because my mother had done amazing work forever, but she literally never had a budget. And I had so many friends who did well, but then really struggled on college, so they couldn't afford it. And that was always heartbreaking. And John had some resources. So my sister's job and mine was to work with, we took Shakespeare, sixth grade class at Shakespeare, 40 kids, and we worked with them for 6 years. And I was the guy that drove the white van around and picked kids up after school and, took them to tutoring. And so that was an amazing chance to build upon my mother's legacy, but also to try and take it another step and show that kids that coming from a tough school and a tough neighborhood could do well. But John created that opportunity. And then this is again where my life is a little happenstance. This is going way back with Shakespeare. The CPS closed Shakespeare when our kids were going into their 8th grade year, so we had to move them all over the city to different schools. But then the neighborhood didn't have an elementary school. So during that same time we were doing that, we started Ariel Community Academy, which is still here to the day, and it's 25 years old now, which is crazy. So time flies. We did that, and then when our kids, we did that from 92 to 98, and then when our dreamers were graduating from high school and going to college, I had to think through what to do next. And we could have taken another class and done another 40 kids. We had the school that was going to grow to 400 pre-K to 8. And CPS had 400,000. And there was something about the math of 40 and 400 and 400,000 that hit me. And honestly, the public schools for us had really been the enemy. Like my mother was always doing at night what wasn't happening during the school day. And King was a basketball powerhouse, but had a 67% dropout rate, and all kinds of issues there. So what I finally thought about was it's easy to throw stones, it's easy to critique, but if you really want to work at scale, you have to go inside the system and try and take the lessons I learned from 46 and Greenwood there. And so when our dreamers went to college, I decided to go work for CPS and see if I could try and help out at that point. But that was a hard decision for me, and I think I took like a 6-month leave from Ariel because I was sort of like hedging my bets and lots of cultural challenges. But it was the best move I could have made.
Oh my goodness! Such a great experience and story to just kind of help you through that transition, right? It got you into the space where a lot of it seems that your mom helped deliver for that, right? And you had the right people around. And Ariel, great school right here in the city. I see kids walking around all the time when I'm out walking the dog, so that's beautiful. So you found yourself hedging your bets over with Ariel, working with John, and of course you still be able to continue with him. And then you found yourself over as CEO of the CPS schools. Take me through what that looks like for you. Like, do you just happen to go online, find her,
No. So I worked there for 2.5 years before, and I was a nobody. I didn't have an assistant. I had a desk, and this was back at Pershing Road, and I just had a desk and a big thing. I was working on magnet schools and service learning, and I was working for the previous CEO, Paul Vallis, and would run around the city with him and sort of visiting schools all over the city. And I knew the South and West Sides well in the Black community, but I didn't know the Latino community really at all. And so that was really important for me to learn and get to know that. And you sort of had the immigrant community up north, and that was fascinating to go to schools where like 30 different languages spoken. And that was, so I went to hundreds and hundreds of schools, and then he left to run for governor. And like I said, I was truly a nobody. And I was 36 years old, and the mayor picked me to run it, and I know a lot of days he regretted picking me. You have to ask him why he did it, but it was I didn't have any political connections. I didn't have any, I wasn't a lifelong CPS whatever. But I think somehow he saw that I was young and hungry and committed and sort of in it for the right reasons. But again, that was happenstance, and Paul doesn't run for governor, and he doesn't take a big risk on me. And then I was fortunate to do that for 7.5 years, and absolutely loved it.
Yeah. No, it's a great story. Both my parents are in education, but they were out in the Valley View district and Joliet area. But we always saw from a distance because of them being in education. I just always had that mind. I always heard the name Arne Duncan, and it was like, all right, who is this? And it just happened to stay consistent. And next thing you know, we're on the court playing ball with each other every morning, and doing some great work in the community as well.
The thing I always thought, best for me, I couldn't have done it in any other city. You have some superintendents that bounce city to city to city, but I knew the streets. I grew up, I knew kids. I played with their uncles. I played with their fathers, and I could do things and move and
talk to people
that you just couldn't do if I were in Philly and New York or something. So part of it was a technical set of skills that you learn and grow on the education side, and labor management and operations and budget. But so much of this was street stuff, and really knowing the guys, knowing the communities. If there's an issue, being able to talk to guys and say, whatever's going on, we got to give kids in this block a pass. And that, just the grounding here again shaped me and gave me the chance to be successful.
For sure. No, I love that. So spent 7 years, was it?
I was at CPS for 10 and 7.5 as CEO. So
got you.
2.5 before I became CEO.
2.5. Okay, so about 10. So you make that transition. Next thing you know, you get a knock. I mean, you're doing wonderful work here in the system, right? You're advocating for teachers. You're advocating for the kids on all sides of the city. Then you get a knock. Former President Barack Obama takes office. You get nominated as U.S. Secretary of Education. Again, was that another happenstance moment for you, or is that something that was a part of the plan?
No,
or
I wish I had a plan. I'm not that smart.
Come on, AD. I thought you were the man with the plan. Clearly, it's not that at all.
Not that at all, and I'll speak to that. But the crazy stories, I came home, a lot of crazy stories. I came home one night and told my wife, I think Barack's going to run for president. And she's like, president of what? She thought it was like the condo association. I'm like, no, he's gonna run for president. She's like, Barack, no, hell no. They used to do the groceries together on the weekends.
Yeah.
So the connection there was Craig Robinson, was basketball. So I grew up. So John recruited Craig to Princeton.
Okay.
First in his family to go to college. Craig and I played together IT for years, and and all the 3-on-3s and stuff. We traveled the country with John, and so Barack to us at first was Craig's little sister's boyfriend. And that, and we had to sort of make sure he was okay for Michelle when we took him on the court. He played a little bit. And
you always got to check him and see what you could do on the court.
100%. I always said, you can't hide character in the court.
Not at all.
You can't hide, you see who you are. So again, the basketball sort of connection. The crazy thing is, my mother played for years. She played at the University of Chicago gym where he was a professor.
Okay.
It's like, your mother used to foul too much. I was like, I had nothing I could say she did. She was a hat. She was like 60 out there, all the guys, but she'd use those games to recruit people to come work at, come volunteer at the program. So he, this is going to sound strange. I didn't go for the job or the position. I had no aspirations to be Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
When I started at CPS, I was the youngest big city superintendent in the country. And then 7.5 later, I was the longest serving because the turnover is every 2 or 3 years. And so I desperately wanted to do 10 years.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say, had it been anyone else, I think I would have said, no, I'm good here. But I knew him, I knew his heart, I knew his character. We had done education policy stuff when he was in the Illinois legislature, and then when he was a senator, we'd visited schools together. I knew what education meant to Craig and Michelle. Great family, and unfortunately her mother just passed, and her dad passed a while ago, but amazing family, but neither one of them had a college education. And Barack had some real challenges growing up, and what he always talked about was he grew up in Hawaii, which is a very forgiving place. And had he grown up in the South or West Sides, that story wouldn't have happened. He had too many anger issues to his father, wasn't in his life, came in his life for about a month when he was 10 or 11, disappeared.
Okay.
Barack was angry, messed around with drugs, did stuff.
Yeah.
He was a little lost.
Yeah.
But in the forgiving environment made it out. So it really was, it wasn't the job, it was really the chance to be part of his team and be part of this historic administration. Someone how many times in life does your friend become president? It's a lightning in a bottle.
Absolutely.
But I just knew his character, and if he had said, come take out the garbage in the White House, I would have said, yes, sir. Like, you just wanted to be, because basketball training, you want to be a great teammate, and you want to be part of great teams. and this was like the most amazing, team to be part of history.
Absolutely.
And so that was, had it been anyone but him, I wouldn't have left. But the
Couldn't
chance
have
to be
left,
part of his team was something that you couldn't. It was like a 1 minute conversation. My wife was like, "Of course we got to do it." I remember I think my daughter was like 6 and my son was 4. My daughter said, "Can we bring the cats?" And we had 2 cats. We bring the cats. And my son asked, "Do they speak English there?"
Oh wow!
I said, "Yes." So that was it.
That was
we
it.
Just we were gone.
Love it.
Yeah.
The community. It's beautiful that the community that you had that was surrounding not only you but John and Michelle and her brother. That's the community that kind of helped pull everything together. And of course, the common denominator that helped deliver and build more of camaraderie and teamwork was being on the basketball court.
100%.
100%. Which I love.
There's no question.
The game really brought you guys together all the way to the White House. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So you're in the White House. What does the day-to-day, because, I've only been privileged to have 1 or 2 friends that have worked or, been in what. What does a day-to-day look like for a Secretary of Education?
Yeah, so it was interesting. People talk about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And, someone in my background probably shouldn't have that. But I remember the first cabinet meeting or 2, I was sitting next to Hillary Clinton, and I'm watching the door where the Secret Service are. And I keep waiting for them to come, like, pull me out. Like, well, you don't belong.
You don't belong.
I swear, it didn't feel like, just go back to Southside Chicago. Just go back home. And I'm watching that door where they come in and out, like, they're going to come snatch you in a minute. And it took a while for me to say, okay, maybe I, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah.
But the caliber of the folks and who they were, and just happened that my seat was next to Hillary's. I'm like, this is not a room I'm sort of should be in. They made a mistake here.
Yeah.
But it was, you have a fancy office, big whatever, but you don't learn anything sitting behind your office. So I traveled I went to all 50 states.
Yeah.
My urban street cred was pretty good. My rural street cred was non-existent. I had none. So I spent a ton of time in rural America.
Yeah.
I never knew white poverty before.
Okay.
And so going to Appalachia and
Wow.
West Virginia and places.
Down
McDowell County, I have a million stories. I'd never been on a Native American reservation before.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole different level of heartbreak and challenge and poverty. And I spent a lot of time there. So I was out. That's how I've always, in Chicago, I was always in schools out there. You talk to kids, you talk to teachers, you talk what's working, what's not. And I don't think I have too many great original ideas. I do think I listen pretty well.
Yeah.
And you pick up enough themes, and you figure out what people need, and so how to set your agenda and how to move something forward. And so it was an amazing time. It was, that part was hard. You're constantly on the road, and we had little kids.
Yeah.
But it was different there because weekends you were basically off.
Okay.
Here in Chicago, like Saturdays I'd be in the community, Sundays you're in churches, so you were on 7 days a week most weeks. But there, weeks would be crazy, but Saturday, Sunday, my kids play soccer or hoops or whatever. I could just
it was some nice balance.
Be daddy. So it was the rhythm was a little bit different.
Nice.
And just trying to collaborate, you find out I don't know, it doesn't make sense, but the Bureau of Indian Education is actually in the Department of Interior, so you got to collaborate with them. Food for schools doesn't come from us; it comes from the Department of Agriculture. So you got to work with Tom Vilsack.
Yeah.
A lot of funding for community colleges came from the Department of Labor. Tom Perez. We were going through the H1N1 bin. Luckily, it wasn't COVID, but that was working with, and then all the Head Start stuff in early childhood was in HHS with Kathleen Sebelius. Okay. So working with all your partners and collaborating, figuring out how to do that. And the part where I just give Barack just unbelievable credit, there was just no ego. People just wanted to get stuff done, and none of us could do it by ourselves. So
you always needed
working in collaboration, I had built obviously a team here. I'd never built a national team, and recruiting people from around the country to come work, and educators with business leaders and nonprofit leaders and folks in the faith-based community. I always really wanted a diverse team. It was an unbelievable experience to sort of figure all that stuff out and learn over time. And it takes some time to really get the hang of it. But it was amazing. It was amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was amazing. I mean, outside looking in, you got to see so much great work that was taking place during this administration. You talked about, you got the weekends off to just kind of be dad and being dad in husband mode as well. I have to ask, I asked this question kind of like to Bobby of like him being with MJ and Hoops to Gym and all that. What were the runs like at the White House? Like, I know you guys had to roll the basketball out several times. Like, what was that like?
Well, I'll back up. The story, when MJ was making his comeback, I was like his practice dummy. So Tim called, and I didn't know he was going to come back, but he was super rusty, and we were playing sort of every day. He was getting better. And then at a certain point, sort of bypassed me. All the guys came back from the NBA.
Yep.
But that was, we were going at it for a couple months there. So that was amazing to be sort of part of that, playing at Hoops the Gym. In DC, occasionally for his birthday, would bring in everybody.
Of course,
Kobe. I never forget Bill Russell being there. There's a picture of Bill Russell, my son. I mean, stuff you can't. LeBron, everybody, KD. That was amazing. That was fun. That was birthdays. But we had a good little run. I got a bunch of guys I knew.
Okay.
I'd bring them in and would go to on the weekends. Would go to the military bases or go to FBI, and occasionally would go to Camp David and play. Okay. But they real good, like our runs now. Real good competitive runs. A lot of fun. So occasionally you had all those guys, and that was like our Hollywood. And
yep.
I remember watching Kobe didn't play. He just sat there and just listened to Bill Russell tell stories.
Oh, wow.
I remember just looking at them and just watching Kobe soak that knowledge up. Yeah. But Magic, Charles, all those, everybody came through.
Everybody came out.
And so those were amazing times, and
Gotcha.
for my kids to be exposed to that and
100%.
get a sense of that. First time my son saw I played at Foster Park on Saturdays.
Yep.
First time my son saw Michael play was at Foster.
Okay.
And my wife came to pick me up, and he was like getting the net down, just getting the net. My son was real lady said to my wife, "He's really tall." And that's all I knew about Michael. He's really tall. She's like, "That's the best basketball player in the world."
Exactly.
He didn't register yet. He was just
not
he's really
yet,
tall.
but I'm sure it did done.
Yeah,
for sure.
So lots of crazy stories.
I love it.
Yeah.
So without, who's probably the top 3 best players in the White House during that administration who could just flat out play that you would give credit to outside of yourself? I know you're one of them, but
we didn't. Honestly, it wasn't a lot in the administration, so we'd bring in other folks.
Oh,
so
you'd have to bring in. Okay,
I brought in friends, DC guys.
Okay,
so guys. I had some college teammates and guys who played.
Okay.
Reggie Love, who was his body man,
Yep.
played at Duke.
Real
good athlete, but honestly, he was probably the only other guy.
Gotcha.
Really,
well, he was fresh, young legs, played at Duke under Coach K, so he had to be able to get up and down.
Yeah, he's a good man.
For sure. All right, so I definitely want to hit this one because you not only played in the NBA Celebrity All-Star Game, but you also took home the MVP trophy. Was that down in New Orleans, correct?
I played 5 years.
Jeez.
Where no one knows. I went 5-0. Nobody else cares. I'm competitive.
No,
so
I want to know all this.
I never lost.
You never lost a game.
Nobody else cares what happens.
Oh, man.
I don't like to lose. So, yeah. So I don't remember what. May have been New Orleans.
New Orleans.
And the truth is, Kevin Hart, they gave Kevin Hart the MVP. And he felt guilty.
I remember
gave it to me. So we got in the house. He said, "I'm going to send it to you." And he sent it to me. So
did he?
Yeah, he's a good man.
For that to happen, Kevin Hart being the big superstar that he is, comedic genius, for him to have a humbling moment on this, hey, man.
He was fantastic. We played together a couple years, and I don't know if we played against each other that year or won. But no, he's a good, he's the hardest working man in the show. He was always on before the game, locker room, during the game,
was always
halftime. I'm like, that's what he was still on the come up. Like he wasn't where he is now.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, this guy is the hardest working man in showbiz, and he made.
He's always on.
Yeah.
He's making his money. He's getting his money's worth.
Funny as hell.
I love it. Now you said 5-0.
I was.
Would you go for a 6-0 if they invited you back?
I got cut. Last one was in Chicago right before.
Yeah.
COVID.
Okay.
And,
2020 All-Star.
That was February, I think. And then the next thing was COVID. So that was it.
Yeah. All right. I might have to make a campaign and have you running for it. Got to check this 6-0. We need 6 rings in Chicago, right?
The question I always ask, it's always rappers, actors. I always ask young kids. They always, I say on YouTube, whatever, like who could actually play. And the only people who can actually play in those games are the women, WNBA players.
Oh, 100%.
So that's who I love playing with, and playing against Elena, playing with Skylar, like that. That was actually, Tamika played with Tamika Catching. So I used to play with her father Harvey in the summer leagues here. So play against the second generation.
Jeez.
But that was the fun for me, was playing with women, because they could go.
They can play. I know that there's a lot of conversation, and there's a lot going on with Caitlin Clark, a lot with Angel Reese here with the Chicago Sky. I mean, just a lot with the WNBA right now. And what people don't realize, and I've been a part of them since Nike Nationals takes place here in Chicago. 30,000 girls here ascend on the city of Chicago, which is great. But I'm able to see and watch them while they're here. And you see them from the beginning. I watched, Caitlin play at Iowa Attack. I watched Angel Reese at Takeover. I watched Sideline with Kevin Durant as well, watching them play. And they can play. They play the game right. They play. They hit hard. They rebound hard. So when people talk about, oh, that's a foul, I'm like, you guys haven't seen anything. Like, they can play, and it's okay. Like, let them play.
Exactly.
They play the game, which I love.
Yeah.
So, transition into after U.S. That term ends with the Secretary of Education. Then you find yourself as co-manager of Chicago CRED. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with Chicago CRED.
Yeah, and this is a little bit more of a painful story, unfortunately, but it goes back to almost where we started, that I started to lose friends to gun violence when I was 14, 15, 16. Guys, honestly, right in this neighborhood. Yeah. So, and that impacted me, and I think honestly scarred me in some ways, a little bit difficult to talk about. And at that point, you don't have a social worker. You just sort of internalize all that as a kid and don't quite know what to do with it. So that's 14, 15, 16. Fast forward to taking over CPS when I'm 36. So fast forward 20 years. Lots I'm proud of. We can come back and talk about higher test scores and graduation rates another time if you want. Yeah. But on my watch, on my 7.5 years, on average, we had a student killed every 2 weeks due to gun violence here in Chicago. And so that was by far the hardest thing I dealt with. Nothing came close. Absolutely. And going to those classrooms, there's an empty desk in a class of traumatized kids, going to those homes and meeting families 99% of the time just after they had lost their kid, going to those funerals. That was by far the hardest thing I dealt with, and it got harder and harder. It didn't get easier. And I don't think I know that we as whatever we are, we as adults, we as educators, we as community leaders, we fail to keep our kids safe on the South and West sides. Yep. And very naively, which shows how not smart I am, when we moved to D.C., I thought it was rock bottom. I thought it couldn't get worse here. In the 7 years we were gone, it got a lot worse. Yep. And I say that, we're motivated by our successes, but we're haunted by our failures. I was really haunted by our failure to keep our kids safe. Okay. And I kept there's a picture I kept above my desk at CPS on the wall. Went to school, and young kid, probably 6th or 7th grade, gave it to me. It was a picture of him climbing up a ladder. And his caption was, "If I grow up, I want to be a fireman." And that, for so many of our kids, is real, the if. And for me, it was always when I grow up. And all my life, I've teach defer gratification and think long term and plan for the future. But if you're just trying to survive day to day, if you're literally just trying to make it, I'm speaking a foreign language. I'm speaking Greek. So this felt like the crisis facing the city. Yep. Honestly, I felt like it wasn't being addressed. Honestly, felt like I had failed to keep kids safe. Yeah. And for the city that had given me every opportunity, educationally, athletically, socially, culturally, for me not to, like people say, you could have gone anywhere and done anything, and I get maybe that's true, but this was the only thing I wanted to do. Yeah. Like I just felt like unfinished business. Yeah. So, we work with the young men and women, and we're unfortunately down to 12-year-olds now, most at risk of shooting and being shot. We started with 25 guys on the far south side. Yep. In one room, we now have 8 sites across the city, and really trying to scale across the city now, and just give guys a pathway, out of that life. And so it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's honestly the most heartbreaking, but it's also the most meaningful. And the runs in the morning for me, that's really my therapy. I need that. Because I see a lot of really tough stuff. I deal with a lot of really tough stuff. For sure. Including the past couple of days. And so we're just trying to make Chicago a safer city. Yep. I just want to give our kids on the South and West sides their childhoods back. We had a little 7-year-old killed yesterday. Walking outside his house. It's brutal. It's never the kid's fault. It's never the kid's fault. And just having our guys transition from that life and seeing that transformation over time, it's extraordinary. I got a million crazy stories of our guys. Now, another basketball story. So the the guy who killed Benji Wilson,
yes,
Billy is on my team.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up playing with Benji.
Yep.
I didn't know Billy, hated Billy all his life.
Yeah.
He got out. We actually met. Interestingly, we met at a peace walk with Father Mike at St. Sabina, and told me his story and what he's trying to do to change the community.
Yeah.
And we brought him in, and he runs one of our sites on the west side now. He's an amazing partner. And Charles, who you talked about, Charles helped put together. We did a reconciliation with him with Benji's brothers, 34 years to the day.
We talked about that
after that incident happened. That was one of the most powerful nights, afternoons I've ever witnessed, been a part of. And so it's many of our staff now are alumni, guys who come through our program, and we have outreach, we have life coaching, we do clinical work, get everyone help them sort of heal from trauma. We have an education team, get everyone their high school diplomas and go to college, and we have a jobs team to help guys get a job at the back end, because I can't ask people to put down the guns if I don't have another way for them to make some money.
Exactly.
And so it's we're making it up every day.
We
make a lot of mistakes every day. We learn by doing, but this team has the most heart and the most. I've been a part of some unbelievable teams, but no team has had the heart and the courage of the team
awesome.
We have now. Yeah.
That's awesome. While I'm here, what are ways that people can help support, be involved? Like, what is it that you need? Because as we know, as we've kind of been talking about it the last 40 minutes or so, you can't do it on your own. You have to do it with the team. You have to do it with support of the community. Like, how can the community, whether it's the Second Half podcast community or others beyond that, like, how can they contribute and help and support?
The question. There's no one way. So many of our guys have never felt that anyone cares about them, and so just coming in. I just bounce site to site every day, and so come visit any of our sites, South and West sides. We have 5 sites for men. We have a women's center. We have a teen center, and then we have an employment and training center. Come see what we do. If you want to tutor, if you want to mentor, we're always looking for jobs. If folks want to hire, get not straight out of Cook County Jail, straight off the streets, but after someone spent a year to 18 months with us, they're in a very different place.
That's great.
If people want to help financially, that's fantastic too. But we're just trying to bridge these different worlds, and the amount of social isolation that so many of our guys experience, and just being around professionals. I'm always trying to bring in guest speakers, and they get sick of hearing from me. And
I'm sure.
We had yesterday, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi was in town. And he came out and talked. Cam Buckner, state rep, came out and talked. And just to have those conversations, see our guys asking questions, that's it's powerful. But we can't run away from this, and so we gotta connect and move outside our comfort zones.
We've got to do better, not only here in Chicago, but in so many other cities. Just like ours, that you want the city to be safe. You want kids to grow up. You want, like you said, 7-year-old just was shot and killed yesterday. So how do we how do we eliminate that? How do we give more opportunity for people to grow up in the city and live long lives? For sure. So you've done incredible service. You've helped within the education system. For you, what's next? Politics still? Is it strictly Chicago CRED? You're gonna run for mayor? You're gonna run for where is it for you that kind of?
I've actually never done politics. I've always done policy. I care a lot about kids. I care a lot about education. I'm obsessed on the gun violence now. So I don't foresee doing something different. We have so far to go. We're aiming for a 50% reduction in gun violence here. I was born in '64, which tells you how old I am. We have not been below 400 homicides in Chicago since 1965, since I was 1 year old. So our goal is we got to get below.
Get to the 4.
Which is still way too high. We're almost double that, and we're on a journey. So for the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're trying to scale in the neighborhoods where we are: North Lawndale on the west side, and Rosen Pullman, West Pullman out south, and scale with our partners in Austin and Humboldt Park, and Garfield Park and Englewood. And so this is, again, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the most meaningful, but I don't foresee a next step. We're either going to succeed or die trying to get the city to a very, very different place. But it's unacceptable what our kids are dealing with now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so and I'm hopeful. It's hard, but I see where we can go. I see the potential. I see as we grow and scale what's possible. For sure.
Couple more questions, and then we'll definitely keep it moving. But one thing I want to ask, a lot of people graduated, whether it's high school, college, they're finishing their careers playing basketball, they maybe even or any other sport, or they may be finishing their pro career, It's something, you had to try to figure out as well. What would be, kind of the first order of business or your first move, to help set yourself up for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as we said earlier, I think I was always blessed that I had other options. Hoops was my biggest passion, my greatest love, but I had other stuff. And I do worry if that's all they have, when that ball stops bouncing, what comes next? For me, again, it was a natural, when you sort of touched on it, like I had other passions. I care a lot about winning. I care a lot about putting the ball in the hoop, but I care more about trying to help people. Yeah. And so for me, the biggest thing is for everyone to try and tap, what is your passion? And that's the one thing in my life. Like, there are times I've made a lot of money, times I've made a little bit of money. I've never been financially motivated, but I've always been so blessed to do exactly what I love to do. Not that it's easy, not that anything. And I think so many people work because they have to work. And I understand that you got to pay the bills, but try and find that passion, whatever that might be, and then figure out how to make a career or how to make a vocation out of what that is. And it can be literally anything in the world, but to do something that you love to do, you want to get up and do every day, whether you get a paycheck or not. And not everybody has that, but trying to tap in and that's why I try to ask guys, say, is it this, is it this, is it that? Yeah. And usually we can find something. I think everyone has a genius, has something. Then you got to, develop that and mold that and learn and continue to grow. But that for me is the first question is, what would you like to do every day if you weren't getting paid a nickel? Yeah. And then how do we make that a job, a career? How do you do that and continue to grow? And, you talked about, I look at, Magic is obviously probably the epitome of that, who extraordinary impact on the court, but, I would argue much bigger impact off the court. I'm doing a lot with Joakim Noah here in the tournament. He's trying to have bigger impact off the court than on the court. And so you can use that platform to leverage that and go some places. But if your biggest impact was on the court, that's amazing. But it's also honestly a little bit sad to me if there's no second act, no second half, which is sort of the point of your podcast here.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. This has been a great interview. Just discussion, talking about your past, talking about the challenges of the city of Chicago. Which ways can people just kind of stay in contact with you, or via social media or anything like that? Just kind of stay abreast of what's going on with Chicago CRED or anything else in Arne Duncan's world.
I stay off of most of social media. As I do a little Twitter, but Chicago CRED, we're on everything. So gotcha. Website, IG, whatever, and and happy to have folks come out and engage and talk. And again, we got to collectively get the city to a better place, and we got to do it in the next couple of years. So appreciate it. Folks want to reach out and continue the conversation. Would welcome that. Would love that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, AD. Appreciate you,
thanks for having me,
man. Absolutely, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I can't wait till the listeners get to hear it for sure. With those paying attention, listening, be sure to follow us. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Check us out on all social media platforms. And this is Second Half Podcast. We're out. Peace. Cosmic.